Hi, I'm making this video as a little kind of a foundation to a call we're having on Wednesday, the first April Fool's Day, I believe is the day of our meeting, April 1st, about corporate water stewardship. So I wanted to just give a little background here before we get going, before the meeting, so that we can use the meeting time to discuss more. So I think it would really start with who are the organizations, well, maybe what is corporate water stewardship? Corporate water stewardship essentially is a commitment by companies to improve the water status in the watersheds, both in their supply chains and where they have plants and production facilities. It's typically a um, uh, value chain resilience play or supply chain resilience play from a company where they're looking to future proof their supply chains. So a beverage company, for example, like Anheuser-Busch or Coca-Cola or Pepsi, would be interested in ensuring that they have water to make their products 100 years from now. So that's essentially what the idea is around um, volumetric or water stewardship. Before we get started, I can mention there are a couple of different types of water stewardship. There's volumetric, which is quantity of water. That's getting water back, keeping water, using water more wisely, making more water available in terms of quantity. There's also a quality benefit accounting that we're not going to go into now, and there's also a biodiversity type of accounting that corporates are increasingly using. And I think we can talk about all of these things. Um, but from a higher level, these are three kind of methodologies akin to a carbon methodology. So in carbon methodologies, we use VM42 for agriculture, VM47 for afforestation. So these are similar, but they're more they're earlier stage than carbon, and they're essentially just used in more closed door arrangements between corporates and service providers who are providing them with either biodiversity benefits, water quality benefits, or water quantity benefits that they'll then report on in their sustainability reports every year and should be aligned with their sustainability strategy. So in this conversation, we're going to be zooming in on the volumetric water benefit accounting, often called VWBA. And you see 2.0, the second version was released in September last year, so it's still relatively fresh and new. So who is, any of these companies signed on have said in principle, we agree that we should do something around water stewardship as a company. So there's many companies, some you've heard of, many you haven't. Like I said, AB, InBev, Coca-Cola, Pepsi are on the list. You also have things like Cargill on the list. Carlsberg is another beverage company on the list. So there's 635 companies, I believe, on the list. So these are, of course, the types of people we would pursue if we move forward with this type of alternative funding, essentially. We believe we can offer a better value for money, and that's our value proposition. We believe we can offer companies things like groundwater recharge or groundwater replenishment, which is the same thing, for cheaper than they're currently paying. So we can go into the methodology a little bit here before we go into the where, but this document goes over, it's 72 pages, quite rich. There's a 6-step process, most of which is self-explanatory. Understand your local context. Excellent. That's in line with everything we do, regardless. Identify and evaluate potential project activities and partners. We will use this time to show you some example activities. Quantify volumetric water benefits of project activities. This is the black box that we need to crack open. Step 4 is plan and agree with a corporate partner on what we'd like to do, implement the project, track the progress, and then allow the corporate to report on those volumetric water benefits in their annual report and through other means. So the 6-step high-level process is relatively straightforward. It's the quantification that's a little bit of the black box. So let's go to like kind of more what is, what is what do these projects look like? There's Appendix C in this WRI. By the way, it's a WRI document, so it's kind of an objective, independent body, science-driven, with Limnotech, Blue Risk, Bonneville being kind of technical partners on this. So if we were to talk about what types of activities would apply, what types of activities can actually recharge groundwater or replenish aquifers, there's a list here in Appendix C. There's different categories. You have agricultural practices, including a lot of the things we talk about in regenerative ag. Cover crops, mulching, all these are regenerative techniques. They also include regenerative agriculture as its own topic. Grazing management, contour planting, agroforestry, all of these are regenerative techniques. And that makes sense because by definition, regenerative agriculture is restoring critical life cycles like water cycles, critical ecosystem function like water cycles, carbon cycles. So on the left column, that's the kind of category of what we're calling direct benefit activities. These are the types of activities that WRI and their associates have identified as being kind of eligible or have potential for groundwater recharge as a type of nature-based solution. So demand management is really about water, and this includes also agricultural use. So in a chat with Nasser, he highlighted that agricultural demand for irrigation is actually already going to be one of the highest. So this topic is more about water demand. It includes things like leak detection and repair. if we're working in an urban environment, that could be an option for some type of volumetric water benefit. There's different green and gray infrastructures, like what are we doing with gray water after it's been used? Bioretention basins. They're different. This is really the overlap between iDE's WASH programming and iDE's ag programming. Drainage systems, check dams. So this is it's both water and ag and kind of various types of activities around green and gray infrastructure. You can go through more and have a look, but it's anything that has a net benefit on how much water we're using. Either you're reducing use or you're recharging aquifers. Next is land conservation and restoration. Very, very similar to agricultural activities. Things like reforestation and agroforestry are very similar. Grassland restoration and regenerative grazing are very similar. So there's this land conservation and restoration principles are pretty similar to the agricultural practices section. And then finally, at the end, we have WASH, so activities that increase access to potable household and community water supply, more WASH. And so then we go on to subsequent columns and we'll see like this is what they're doing. So we have the VWB indicator. This is what are they doing? So in the case of this WASH section is more about volume provided and volume treated. The area that I look into typically in ag is reducing runoff is the simplest way to look at it. And then there's also a recharge method, but essentially this reduced runoff refers you to a method called the curve number method. And then it goes into in Appendix D1, it goes into what the curve number method is. So we're getting into nitty gritty, but like this is getting down to like how do we apply that 6-step method. So this document will help us get into it. We can talk in our call Wednesday about about what type of information is needed, but it's really here. But this doesn't even take you to the real information that's going to make sense, because this just brings you to something called a curve number, which requires things like here we go, runoff volume, things like evaporation, precipitation, slope, even things like soil type, uh, soil infiltration. Those are the types of indicators that we need to collect to kind of connect to account for the water benefits associated with this activity, as per the name. So that's the kind of like quick deep dive into like how do we um, how do we put meaning behind some of these processes that we're talking about? So if we say that these companies are committed to water stewardship, that's what we're talking about. That they're committed to doing activities like these, um, and proving it with those formulas, and as part of that 6-step process. So now maybe the next question we could be asking is where would this be relevant? There are a number of data sets. The first one I would point to is just connected um, to the Water Action Hub itself, to the UNCEO water mandate, which is that first list of companies I showed you. All of these folks collectively, they have decided that these are the 100 priority basins that they believe they should work on. Vulnerable basins that maybe have some supply chain relevance for them. There's a lot in the U.S. With definite opportunity in the U.S. in this space. We can start with countries where we're working already. So, for example, let's go to East Africa, where we have Nairobi, Ethiopia. There's a couple of watersheds here that that collectively these 635 companies have said, yeah, those look like they would be a priority basin. It doesn't mean all 634 companies are going to work in all these watersheds. In fact, that's not at all the case. So it's really about playing the matching game of which corporates are prioritizing which watersheds, and where are we working? Are we working in those watersheds? So one exercise we'll have to do is go through and say, in our countries of intervention, where are the watersheds that we are these corporates are prioritizing? And it's a great opportunity to reach out to those corporates as well, because every company has its own kind of subset of watersheds. According to this, practically all of Zambia is a priority because it's all in the Greater Zambezi watershed. But you'll see in a minute that that's not the case with. You can go to a certain company and they may have a very nuanced approach to which watersheds they're targeting. A good thing about this data set is that it is global. So we have looked at Bangladesh as a case study, both with I think the Coca-Cola Foundation as well as Pepsi, who referred to the mega watershed in the north, the mega basin. But they all had slightly different definitions of where those lines are, where those boundaries are. So a good example here, if we use East Africa as just a reference point, let's use Kenya as a reference point. Now we're going to go to the Coca-Cola's Africa Water Stewardship Initiative map. This is through a partnership with GWC, who I think we could reach out to in this process. But they have some of their watersheds are the same, some are different. This light blue Indian Ocean Tana watershed is actually split up, and some of it is not included. So here you have maybe zeroed in to the Tana and Galana basins within that greater Indian Ocean watershed. So now this is a great example of information that we do have access to. It says, well, these are the ones Coke is prioritizing. Turkana watershed is not even on the priority list for the 634 companies. However, it is on Coke's priority list here. So there's not an exact overlap. There's subsets. There's There's some that are totally opposite of they're prioritized on one, they're not on the other. The other example could be Zambia. This is more of a sub shed. Kafue 1 is the sub of the greater Zambezi Basin. So it doesn't mean we can't work in Western Zambia or the Copper Belt if we have appropriate activities, but it means Coke will probably be less interested. Coke seems to probably have a plant around Lusaka and other supply chain interests around Lusaka, and this is where they're working. So if we're currently working with farmers who have a couple of hundred hectares or more collectively in this watershed, they would be great candidates for exploration of a water project. So this is one company and their priorities. This is many companies, and it's so general that it's hard to even know what the priorities may be. But one interesting thing about this tool as well that you could just see is that if you click on it, it will tell you who's working in these different basins. So if you click on the Zambezi Basin, it shows you even on a map on roughly where their activities are. And below it will show you who's doing what. So, well, to an extent, it's not super detailed, but at least could give us some hints. So we have Anheuser-Busch AB InBev doing something. What? I'm not sure. And there's all these other projects. So there's projects here, and then these are organizations. So this might be like these particular companies are investing in these projects, or some combination of that. You see Africa Water Stewardship Initiative here. That is the same Africa Water Stewardship Initiative that we see here. So it is reflected on this hub. So they do some level of reporting, but it's not a whole lot of detail. If you click on it, it really varies how much information they give about each project, but some of them have more than others. This has details. If you click on details, it may or may not be populated with information. There's nothing here. But project overview, it at least tells you where they are in this process. It's past the propose, prepare, assess, commit. They're currently implementing. So we may be able to get some intel through this page, but it will at least give us like a rough idea of what kind of activities are happening where that are reported through this mechanism. So that is the where, the who are the companies, the where are these watersheds. So we can go around to our different countries and see where do we have overlap. Vietnam and Cambodia look to have quite a lot of opportunity. So if we can find out company by company, where are they targeting, then that could help us to zero in. That might be about all I have to say right now, is like a kind of prep, and then as we meet, we can dig into some more details. Thank you so much.